Welcome to Secrets of Black Star. Black R&B female singers who stepped onto the stage wrapped in glittering gowns, voices dripping seduction, souls unfiltered, and desires that the world never allowed them to speak openly. To the crowd, they looked like goddesses, radiant, flawless, untouchable. But behind those dazzling smiles lived women who broke the rules quietly, privately, bravely. Women who refused to shrink their hunger to fit a narrow definition of what a woman should be. This is not a tabloid. This is not scandal porn. This is the war between instinct and prejudice, between appetite and expectation, between freedom and shame. And tonight you will see these women not as icons frozen in spotlight, but as human beings who loved fiercely and lived unapologetically. So before we begin, like this video, leave a comment, and make sure you subscribe. You're about to witness truth. Tina Turner. Was she too powerful for men to handle? Tina Turner, the fire that made even love run for cover. She wasn't a performer. She was a natural disaster wearing diamonds. She walked into rooms like lightning, and men felt it instantly, not because she manipulated them, but because she burned too bright for anyone who didn't know how to stand in heat. In Las Vegas, 1978, after one show, Tina disappeared with a young dancer. 2 days later, he returned silent, shaken, and forever changed. "I love her," he whispered, "but I'm not strong enough to be loved back." Later came rumors of a brief affair with a white Hollywood actor in a Manhattan apartment. 3 weeks of passion that ended with one note: "You are beautiful, but you burn everything." Producers tried to dim her flame, cut her outfits, shrink her energy, tame her image. But Tina refused. "I'm Tina Turner. Women have the right to be loved with all their bodies." And in Switzerland, near the end, she said it without regret. Some people run from fire. Some are born to burn, even if it means standing alone in the glow of their own fire. Aretha Franklin. Did America fear a woman who loved on her own terms? Aretha stood under the spotlight like royalty without a crown. Her voice was prayer, medicine, confession, and weapon all at once. But behind the elegance lived a woman ruled by instinct, not by society's scripted version of feminine restraint. By 14, she was already a mother, and every rumor that followed her became a reflection of a world that feared women who felt deeply. Musicians whispered that when Aretha called you to record at night, you didn't just play music, you surrendered to a world where desire and soul were equal. She refused to sing Dr. Feelgood until it felt like real love, not polite packaging. Producers labeled her difficult. Maybe she simply refused to lie. In her final years, she wasn't afraid of death. She was afraid of being remembered as something she wasn't, untouchable, cold, controlled. So tell me, is authenticity a threat, or is it just honesty? Society still can't handle. Donna Summer. Did she revolutionize desire before the world was ready? Donna didn't just create disco, she turned longing into a cultural weapon. When Love to Love You Baby hit American radio, the world pretended to be shocked, but it was actually terrified. Not terrified of the sound, terrified of a woman controlling the narrative of pleasure instead of letting men define it. The studio session became legend, lights low, breath slow, emotion unfiltered. Critics called her indecent, but that reaction revealed more about them than about her. Donna leaned in deeper, not to shock, but to remind people that female desire is not a myth or a malfunction. It is a human pulse. When she walked through Italy or Manhattan, she moved like someone who carried her own permission. And she wrote before she died that she would love the same way again. So the question is, if a woman turns desire into art, why does society suddenly panic? Whitney Houston. Was purity just a cage built for her? Whitney's voice sounded like heaven. So the world demanded she behave like she came from heaven. That was her curse, because Whitney loved wide, loved deeply, loved across lines, and the world punished her for it. In Atlanta with Robin Crawford, she found safety. With certain younger men, she found escape. In the studio, she turned confession into melody. The engineer said her vocals felt like truth nobody was supposed to hear. Hollywood, executives, PR managers, they all tried to script her into a symbol of flawless purity. But diary entries later revealed a woman fighting between what the world demanded and what her heart actually craved. Whitney wasn't destroyed by love. Whitney was destroyed by the fear of being judged for love that wasn't symmetrical or convenient. So let's debate it. Is purity a virtue, or is it a prison society uses to control women? Millie Jackson. Was she the first woman who actually spoke like real women think? Millie didn't try to sanitize desire. She confronted it head-on, with comedy, rage, sarcasm, and grit. That's why people were uncomfortable. Not because she was too much, but because she said out loud what other women only whispered to each other. On stage, she broke into monologues, roasted cheating men, demanded reciprocity, demanded satisfaction, demanded emotional equality. And radio stations cut her because she wasn't ladylike. She refused the polished mannequin role the industry wanted. She refused to act fragile. She refused to make male egos comfortable. When she said, "I didn't come here to be a doll, I came here to be a woman," she meant it as a warning. Millie wasn't a scandal. Millie was the beginning of female agency in R&B being spoken in full volume. So tell me, why is a woman called vulgar for saying the exact same truths men brag about daily? Patti LaBelle. Was sensual power her superpower or her curse? Patti LaBelle didn't ask permission to exist loudly. She walked through America like a magnetic storm wrapped in silk, and the world felt it long before it ever understood it. From teenage Philly porches to Paris stages, Patti always knew her body carried heat and her voice carried destiny. Men whispered, women whispered louder, and the industry tried to decide what version of Patti was socially acceptable. But Patti never auditioned for permission. She believed desire deserved the same oxygen as talent. She believed women deserved the right to want, and that belief terrified people. Her stage performances were described as too hot, too intense, too consuming. But maybe the real threat was not her voice, it was her autonomy. Patti didn't perform to impress men. She performed to free herself from rules designed to shrink her. And decades later, she still stands as proof that a woman who chooses her own flame cannot be owned, edited, or contained. Patti LaBelle defied the world simply by refusing to dim. Etta James. Why does raw female emotion always get labeled dangerous? Etta James didn't merely sing pain, she weaponized it. She carved herself into people's memory not by perfection, but by brutal, honest vulnerability. Her voice shook like someone remembering a moment they swore they'd never relive again. She grew up inside chaos and reached for love the same way people reach for air underwater, violently, urgently, desperately. Critics said she was reckless, but maybe they mistook searching for validation with seeking destruction. Etta was always trying to understand if she was lovable, not just talented. Her songs dripped with memory, not the kind you brag about, the kind you try to outrun. When she performed Tell Mama, she didn't sell a lyric. She sold a lived truth. Fame tried to smooth her edges, but Etta refused because her edges were the only thing that ever felt honest. The world remembers her because she bled in public, and most people are too afraid to even admit they bleed at all. Natalie Cole. Was her real addiction the feeling of being alive? Natalie Cole lived at the intersection of elegance and hunger. She inherited royalty, she inherited expectation, and she inherited a spotlight that never once asked if she actually wanted it. On stage, she looked polished, controlled, almost aristocratic. But her private world was a different dimension, one where passion wasn't a luxury, it was oxygen. College friends joked she loved fast and forgot slow. They didn't realize she wasn't chasing chaos. She was chasing intensity. She needed life to feel like something. She needed connection to hit hard enough to prove she wasn't sleepwalking through fame. She used stage freedom as proof of humanity, not rebellion. Natalie wasn't self-destructing. She was trying to stay awake. In the end, her diary revealed no guilt, only clarity. She didn't regret loving fast. She regretted that the world preferred women who never loved deeply enough to scar. Maybe Natalie wasn't reckless. Maybe she was just alive in a world that preferred its women numb. Jean Knight. Why does dominance look villainous only when a woman wields it? Jean Knight didn't raise her voice. She didn't need seduction tricks. She didn't need theatrics. She walked into a room and every man suddenly realized he wasn't the one in control anymore. That was the threat. That was the crime. Not the desire, the power. Jean Knight carried a kind of feminine authority the industry had no vocabulary for. They tried calling her difficult. They tried calling her inappropriate, because the only category available for women who refused to be inferior was danger. Rumors followed her because the world didn't believe a woman could be dominant without being immoral. Society needed her to be punished. Because if a woman can own her agency without apology, then men lose the monopoly on defining desire. Jean Knight became an icon not because she seduced crowds, but because she walked through patriarchal infrastructure like she didn't fear consequences. That was revolutionary. And revolutions are always labeled scandal before history quietly upgrades them to legacy. Sylvia Robinson. Did she invent hip-hop because she refused to whisper? Sylvia Robinson is remembered as the mother of hip-hop. But before that title, she was a woman who refused to be silent about what women actually feel when the lights are low and nobody is performing for respectability politics. When she made Pillow Talk, she didn't stage seduction. She recorded vulnerability. She recorded longing. She recorded the emotional tremor that most women are trained to suffocate. That terrified the industry. Investors fled, not because it was explicit, but because it was female-authored. Sylvia wasn't just breaking creative ground. She was breaking ownership mythology. She built an empire on rhythm that was not filtered through a male translation layer. When she said, "I recorded the real feeling," she was saying something deeper. The truth of women cannot always be delivered safely, softly, gently. Sometimes the truth burns, and Sylvia Robinson accepted the burn because she refused to inherit silence as destiny. Marlena Shaw. Was silence her ultimate rebellion against the system? Marlena Shaw was the calm storm, the kind of woman who didn't destroy you with impact. She destroyed you with interpretation. People projected onto her what they feared, wanted, or couldn't admit. She didn't need explicit narrative. She weaponized suggestion. She lived inside the emotional architecture of secrecy. She understood intimacy was not always physical. Sometimes intimacy is simply standing in a room and knowing you are holding the psychological advantage. Marlena performed like someone who had learned the cost of speaking too specifically, so she built power out of silence. She controlled narrative by refusing to gift details to a world that only weaponized women's specifics against them. When she wrote that one touch could birth an entire song inside her, she was explaining that feeling itself was art, and the world never forgave women who used their interior world as material. Silence was not Marlena's retreat. Silence was Marlena's victory. If sex was forbidden, then music was freedom. These women proved that sound could carry everything society tried to silence: longing, hunger, rage, heartbreak, curiosity, rebellion, tenderness. Desire was never their shame. It was their language, and history punished them not because they were immoral, but because they were honest in a world terrified of honest women. When we listen back now, We're not just hearing old records. We're hearing confessions trapped inside melody. We're hearing women who refuse to shrink their humanity just to be acceptable. That is the real legacy. So listen with memory. Listen with empathy. Listen like someone who understands that desire is a sign of being alive, not a crime. And if you believe that art should not censor the human heart, like this video, subscribe, and share this message so more people can see these stories and honor the icons who changed music, culture, and the meaning of love. See you next time.